Hi, my name's Tanya Fosdick and I'm Head of Research at Agilicis.
I'm Lorraine Willis. I'm Regional Safety Coordinator at Highways England, covering the East region.
Brilliant. And we're here today to talk to you about how we use the double diamond process to discover, develop and deliver a young rider intervention. So I'm going to hand over to Lorraine to let us know what we're talking about today.
Yep, so over the next 20 minutes, we'll take you through a background to the project, go through our initial methodology and a motorcycle delivery review. Tanya will then go through the double diamond approach and the findings from that. And we'll go through the CBT project design, new elements to the pilot groups and changes that we made to the CBT syllabus to test. We'll touch on the evaluation design of the project and go through our findings and next steps. So to start with the background, as I said, I'm one of 6 regional safety coordinators at Highways England. I cover the East region. There's one in each region in the country. Highways England are a key partner of the National Motorcycle Framework, and as part of my remit, I work with and support local road safety partnerships. So one of the questions that I asked the partnerships was if there was one thing as a region that we could focus on and with Highways England support work together on, what would it be? And there was a unanimous answer for that, and it was motorcycling. So we looked at setting out our starting questions. The first was what do we know about the data? We often make presumptions about what data is telling us, but actually Highways England look at the strategic road network, road safety partnerships look at their network. Could we have one report that covered all of it? Members of the public, you know, it doesn't matter to them which road they're on. So we commissioned SERP, Will Cubbin at SERP, to carry out a full data review. Then we wanted to look at what everybody is currently doing in relation to motorcycling, and this formed our service delivery review. And then from that, do we know what is and isn't working in the region? And then who could help us in taking this project forward? So as I said, I cover the East region, and part of the strength of this project was it wasn't just a Highways England project, it was very much a regional approach. So all local authorities, all the road safety partnerships in the region were on board with it. We also had support from the Beds, Herts and Cannons Roads Policing Unit. The project was managed and driven by Road Safety Analysis, and we had further support from Dr. Julie Gandolfi, Driving Research Limited. So to start with, Will Cubbin carried out our casualty analysis, and I'll touch on that further on in the presentation. We then carried out our service delivery review, and this was followed by a double diamond workshop that Tanya will go through with you. This led to the creation of a pilot project known as Ridefree, which was a randomly controlled trial, and then we'll touch through the rollout of that project. So to start looking at the data, what we wanted to look at was the percentage of riders involved and their age in relation to the size of bikes that they actually ride. So this highlighted a number of issues for us. Firstly, there was a peak in up to the age of 24, which is what we would consider the young riders, with 31% up to 125cc bikes, and a high number of collisions in this age group. In the middle-aged age size of bikes, there was a 38% of collisions that were happening in weekdays, and these were commuter riders. Then we had, which was a surprise for us, a smaller number of collisions, but still very high risk on the larger bikes at weekends. So what was really interesting to us is that we know that riders are at risk and they're perhaps one of our highest risk groups, but in the East region, whilst they represent 23 to 29% of KSI collisions, they only actually make up 0.6% of private motorised traffic. So from our point of view, this puts them as one of our highest risk road user groups. And you can see from the graph below, we have 2 peaks. This is predominantly between the age range of 20 to 29 and then 40 to 49. The risk ratio for young riders is the highest of all the groups. So following on from understanding this data, we looked at a service delivery review where we carried out an analysis of all of the different interventions that were currently happening in the region and have happened previously and may not be happening anymore for various reasons. So this gave us a total of 39 different interventions just in the East. And I think if you multiply this across the whole country, it's quite an insight actually into the duplication, the different things that can go on, all trying to target the same issue. The types of interventions range from magazines, websites, training, assessments and enforcement. Many focused on advice and changing attitudes, but actually there was a mismatch between intervention target audience and casualty groups. What we found is that young riders were vastly underrepresented, and a majority of interventions focused on those weekend leisure riders, which, as our data showed, were actually within the context one of the lower risk groups. Many of these interventions had also not been evaluated. So I think with the exception of Bike Safe and Biker-Dan, there was quite limited insight into the effectiveness of these interventions. And there was also no consistent regional message. So this presented us with some clear opportunities for collaboration moving forward.
Great, so what did we do from there? Well, the first thing we did was use a process from the Design Council called the Double Diamond process. And this basically involved us locking away stakeholders and experts for about 2 days to work through this process, using the fact that we knew that young riders were our casualty priority and that they were underrepresented in collisions. So we started with that problem, and the whole idea is you kind of open out by doing a needs analysis, so a full analysis of all the Stats 19 data. What is the problem, why, where, etc. What can we learn from other academic research from the literature about why young riders might be at heightened risk, using Mosaic to do some socio-demographic profiling and kind of bringing together as much different data as we had. We had Karen Cole in the room from MCIA talking about motorcycle ownership, and we had road safety officers who had insights into what worked and what hadn't previously with this age group. We then really delved down into defining the problem. So who are we going to be targeting and what specific elements were we going to be looking into? And then on day 2, we kind of reopened this back up using the COM-B model to actually understand, well, now we know what the problems are, what mechanisms, so which intervention functions might we use in order to effect behaviour change, which behaviour change techniques specifically would we want to use. And then this allowed us to kind of move back down again to design our intervention using a logic model and which evaluation framework would we be measuring against. The key thing with the Double Diamond process is you have your problem and you don't dash to the solution. It could be quite a painful 2 days of working through this process, but the idea is that you're not creating something based on assumption. You have to work through it stage by stage in order to get to the answer. So from the Double Diamond, we found a number of behaviours that we wanted to focus on, which came out of the data from research insights and from previous experience. So there was a number of young rider behaviours we wanted to look at, encouraging them to wear appropriate clothing, both as a protection and to increase their visibility, to think about improving their riding position, particularly at junctions, to look at increasing their understanding of their own risks, why they're at risk, looking at junctions again, improving speed choices, particularly on the approach to junctions, improving their hazard perception skills, and also their attitudes towards training to encourage them to take more training. We also looked beyond young riders to the behaviours of others. So we wanted to improve driver understanding of their needs and how young riders might behave, especially if they're inexperienced. Coming back to junctions, where again, how do other drivers behave at junctions to reduce their risk? And also thinking about with supporting structures for young riders. So how could we work with parents, peers, schools, etc., to assist young rider and reducing their risk? And one of the things we kept coming back to throughout the 2 days was, how does the CBT fit into this? So compulsory basic training is something that all young riders have to do before they start going out there on the road. And it seemed a really good opportunity to link in with CBT to design whatever solution we came up with. And so that's exactly what we did. We decided to enhance the CBT and to see if we could test its effectiveness. So we had 4 pilot groups. We had a standard CBT, so just as they would get if they just walked off the street and booked a CBT. We had what was known as an age stratified CBT. So this was purely first time young riders who were taking the normal CBT syllabus, but they were not mixed with more experienced or older riders. We then had an enhanced CBT, which gave them some e-learning to complete before the day. So this included some hazard perception and highway code elements, as well as attitudinal and behavioural elements. And also the CBT itself on the day was altered slightly because these elements had been included beforehand, allowing them to do a split ride. At the moment, the ride is right at the end of the day and could be quite long. So this allowed some time to pause and reflect and discuss with trainers. And then our gold standard was a 2-day enhanced CBT. So this allowed a fully integrated and behavioural and attitudinal elements to be added in, and a much slower pace to allow the students to take all of these different elements in, again splitting the rides out on the road over 2 days. And the 2 enhanced versions were designed by Dr. Julie Gandolfi, a psychologist at the Driving Research Limited organisation. And that meant that the evaluation elements and the design elements were very much kept apart. So we recruited trainers to participate in the trial through DVSA Alert, through some MCIA contacts and through road safety partnerships. And in the end, we ended up with 15 different training schools in the East who were recruited and trained to be able to deliver these 2 enhanced versions. So the trial itself, young people signed up to it on the promise that if they completed all elements of the evaluation, they would have their CBT paid for. They did a pre-questionnaire, and then they were randomly assigned to one of the 4 groups. So they didn't know the details of the other 3 groups. They only knew the type that they were subject to themselves. We had 456 registrations and 93 completed the entire process, which was the pre and post questionnaire, the completion of the CBT, and fully engaged in the whole thing. The questionnaires themselves, we asked them about their own experience riding previously, so had they done any off-road riding, also some information, demographic information, so we understood age, gender, etc. We wanted to know about their willingness to engage in different risky behaviours, so that was measured, as were some facts-based questions about safe riding, so what was their knowledge about different elements. We also used attitudinal questions, which had been adapted from the rider attitude questionnaire. And then really quite importantly, we wanted feedback on the content and the length of the CBT. So how did they find the CBT that they'd done? Obviously, they didn't know what it was in comparison to, but how did they rate their experience? For each participant, a trainer completed a questionnaire post-CBT. So that talked about how they felt the session went, how they felt the student learnt, were there any problems experienced as part of the CBT. And then right at the end of the whole project, we undertook quite in-depth interviews with the trainers to understand their barriers and opportunities, how they felt the different versions of the CBT worked in practice. So just touching on some of that feedback from them. So with the novice only version, so this was where they were literally just taking the same CBT as they would normally do, but they were just young riders. There was some feedback that some students were unprepared and lacking in confidence, and this didn't really differ from how they would normally be, doing a normal standard CBT. But actually the whole idea of just having youngsters together seemed positive for some students with mild autism and ADHD, because the group dynamics, they were all inexperienced, they were all young, and that allowed them to open up and engage a little bit better. With the 2-day version, there were quite a few positives found. So again, those with mild autism and ADHD found it a good environment. It was a relaxed training environment. There's a lot to fit into a CBT in 1 day. And so having those 2 days allowed the trainers to pace it. They also were able to teach much more because they weren't just sticking to the syllabus. They were able to have discussions with the students about different elements of risk. And it most definitely enhanced the on-road element from being able to pace it again over 2 days. However, there were two elements which were difficult for the trainers. So it's quite difficult to account for different experience levels. These were randomly assigned to the different groups, and some of them had had off-road experience, or some of them were really quite nervous. It meant that it was difficult to know who needed 2 days and who actually would be able to complete a CBT easily in 1 day. And that kind of comes on to the last point about it can be quite difficult from a business perspective to deliver CBT over 2 days. It's a competitive market, and giving that much time to CBT wasn't felt that it could work from a business perspective. So looking at the final version, eLearning, this was where we had some really quite positive trainer feedback. So it was felt that students came prepared and they were engaged. They already had a lot of understanding about different elements of riding. The highway code, for example, gave them, some of these students normally would have not known anything about road signs or road rules. So now they were much better prepared. And more than one trainer felt that it was akin to having students who were car drivers because they were that much better equipped. And so given all of that, and the fact that it sped up the process as well, because there were less questions about the road rules, it was felt by the trainers that they would really like to have this in an ideal world as part of CBT. Looking at it from the other side by the students, again, the e-learning had some really positive results in terms of changes pre and post from the questionnaires. So the e-learning results had the most positive improvements in what can affect your riding. There's a whole module on there about the different elements, behavioural and attitudinal things, which can affect the safety of riding. It also had good improvements in understanding the need to maintain their bikes well, and also increases in the levels of agreement with different safety statements and thinking about awareness of different risk taking. And there's just two quotes there on screen about just kind of echoing what the trainers said about them being much better prepared for their CBT after having completed the e-learning. So just to kind of conclude, what we had here was some content which was directly linked to the collision data and those double diamond findings. We really needed the trainer participation, and their feedback was absolutely essential in understanding what might work and what wouldn't work. So understanding those barriers from a business perspective, we could have designed the best gold standard CBT under the sun, but if they wouldn't be able to deliver it on the ground because of the barriers that they identified, it was going to be a non-starter. Having said that, some of the trainers who participated in the trial are offering a 2-day version as an option, and some parents are choosing to pay extra in order for their children to do that, to have that 2-day version. I think the last point here, which is really important and something Lorraine stressed throughout, was the project was zero cost to partnerships. We wanted it to have an equitable delivery across the region, that a young person in one part of the region would be as able to access this as somebody in another part. So aside from the expert input and signposting, the partnerships themselves didn't have to do anything. All their role was pushing people onto this. So obviously we've rattled through quite a lot of information. There is a big report which is available on this website here, www.ridefree.co, which talks about all the different elements. So includes Will's casualty analysis, the full findings from the motorcycle delivery review. Our double diamond is summarised in there, as well as the full evaluation of the Ridefree project itself. And the last thing really is a call to action for everybody watching this. It has now been rolled out. It was last July, I believe. It was rolled out nationally by DVSA in terms of the e-learning modules are now what they're recommending young people to do before their CBT. And trainers are able to offer the enhanced version, so a slightly different syllabus for those who have completed it. So what we're asking is, you as road safety practitioners, please do signpost trainers, get them to sign up locally to deliver this and participate, and encourage young riders to go ahead and do this. There are some really handy little videos on the website here, which kind of talk about the benefits of Ridefree, and especially to parents of why it would be a good thing for your child to complete it before doing their training. And on that note, I've just put our contact details up. Please do come to us if you have any questions. But I think that's all from us today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.